as I mentioned a moment ago, the New York Times editorial board has confirmed what many of us have known all along. And they had an article entitled "The Startling Evidence on Learning Loss is In." That says a lot. And look, it's tempting for some of us absolutely to roll our eyes saying, all right, where have you been? We all have known that there was an enormous learning loss due to COVID and school shutdowns. Why are you just now coming to this information so late? But look, it cannot be denied that the New York Times literally sets the agenda for the legacy media as well as defines the narrative for the left. We all know that. So what have they finally conceded about learning loss from the COVID-era school closures? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Meg Kilgannon. She's a senior fellow for education studies here at the Family Research Council. She also served in the Department of Education during the Trump administration. Meg, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me back, Jody. It's great to see you.
It's always great to see you as well. All right, let's jump into this. So here we are. It was, 19 months ago, a year and a half ago at least, that the New York Times ran a headline that said, "Parents stop talking about the lost year." Right. And now looks like they have had an about face. Are they finally admitting that there were destructive outcomes from school closures due to COVID?
Well, I don't think for those of us with our biblical worldviews, Tony, it's no surprise that that once again the public school system has been in the service of the agenda of adults rather than in the service of children, right? And the New York Times is confirming this for us, which we already know. The amazing thing about the article about the New York Times position before was that if you implied that somehow shutting down the economy, the schools, that government, everything was going to be bad for people, you were part of the problem. And it now that they are letting us think these things or acknowledging that these things are true, it's quite telling.
Yeah, it's interesting to me along this whole thing that the article that I referenced, that you referenced as well, "The startling evidence on learning loss is in." All right, that's a pretty strong statement. But they have since changed the title of that article, and now the name is "How to Help Your Adolescent Think About Last Year." Amazing. Okay. Yeah. So now we've gone to the startling truth to, let's help your adolescent think about last year a little bit different. So let's try to get into it. What are they saying in this article? Let's try to break it down for us.
When I arrived at the Department of Education in May of 2020, actually, it was not a brief time there, but I learned a lot. We were really trying to get the schools open, and there was just all this infrastructure that was not going to allow the schools to be reopened, right? And so what the article is saying is that now, we really messed up. We didn't, turns out kids aren't as resilient as we told everyone they were, that stopping them from learning really does harm their lives and really does limit their potential. And this is going to be a drag on the future economy. And this is great for them to acknowledge now that the solutions that they're offering in this article are not going to be enough, I fear. What we really need to do is the first step is, of course, acknowledging the problem, which they've done. And there needs to be remediation. Maybe we need to have some grades that aren't passed into the next grade. Maybe we need to offer curriculum from the previous grades to whatever current grade the child is in, right? There's a lot of things that we can do to address this problem. And for the children whose parents cannot get them out of a public school system, we really want to make sure that those kids are well served. And the tutoring programs that are being suggested now, the online learning programs that are being suggested now will help some kids, but other kids will be left behind.
Well, and many of them have been left behind. I mean, you're exactly right. I saw that the progress, student progress in things like math and reading, are have been set back as much as 2 decades. I mean, this is stunning for obviously that can't be for an individual, but for national standards, we've seen an enormous setback in math and reading, and obviously that is reflective of individual students. But also, Meg, and this is something that rarely is talked about, COVID and the school closures got students accustomed to not going to school.
Yes.
And now that schools have reopened, we are seeing school attendance literally, it's just cratered. How do we recoup this and get students actually to go back to school at this point?
Well, the important thing in this case is not to listen to the people who tell you that the children aren't going to school because the school doesn't represent them or doesn't reflect their life story or what have you. They don't see themselves in the curriculum and all of the critical race theory tropes that we're all too familiar with now. The kids are voting with their feet for many reasons. There's a crisis in the family, for sure. And but when you have high school kids who are just, chronically absent, missing most of the school year, in fact, they're doing it because, one, they know they can get away with it. They know they'll be passed through to the next grade, and that they will get this degree that doesn't really mean much in those cases. So there's no consequence really for their absenteeism, unfortunately. But also what they are being taught isn't helping them. I think they don't want to hear anymore about how they're not seen in the curriculum. I don't think they really care about cultural competency. I think if we were offering children education that really was aspirational, that talked about big questions that matter. Why is this person here on earth? What are they supposed to be doing with their lives? What gifts have they been given by God? If we can say God, if we can't say God, what gifts have they been given by their circumstances and the beauty of themselves that they can use in service of others in the world? How can we reach children? Adolescents want to do big things. Their whole work of adolescence is figuring out what you're going to do with your life. And telling kids that they're either oppressors or oppressed and that there's no way for them to get out of those two categories is not helping answer that question of what to do with your life. So until schools can offer something better than that kind of gruel, I think you're going to continue to see voting with their feet and leaving schools that are failing.
Really good points, Meg. And, I saw that the CDC came out that with a report indicating that some 40% of high school students had persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. As many as 22% had seriously considered suicide. 10% reported that they had actually attempted suicide. I mean, the devastation from what we experienced has gone far beyond what most people realize. I want to play a quick clip for you, and I know our time is running out, but White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre made it sound like the Trump administration was focused on shutting things down and not opening it up. I'd love to play this clip and get your reaction to it.
Let's not forget, when the president walked into this administration, the economy was at a tailspin. And that was because of what the last administration did. And so we had small businesses were shut down. We had schools where majority of schools were shut down. Large jobs were lost. And the pandemic was not under control.
Unbelievable. Set the record straight for us, please.
Lots of people wanted the schools to be reopened. Even the American Academy of Pediatrics, who we argue with a lot over questions like gender identity, they wanted the schools to be reopened. We all knew that this was not good for children, but what the children are always subject to the adults who are running the world. And when we let adults run the world who are interested in political goals first, then we're going to have outcomes like this. And that was certainly part and parcel of the American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association. We're all working in cooperation with the CDC to establish guidelines that kept schools closed. And now our children are going to pay the price for those decisions. The good news is that if we can get out of our own way and allow Jesus to let the children come to him, allow ourselves to let that happen, and to make an educational system where that's possible, we can recover these losses and have a better, brighter future.
Absolutely. Meg Kilgannon, thank you so much for joining us on this edition and bringing this incredibly important information our way. Now's the time. It's time for the body of Christ, for Christians to stand up and minister to our children and those around us with the love of Jesus, for sure. Thank you so much, Meg. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Jody. Happy Thanksgiving.